Are you tired of fungus gnats buzzing around your plants and your home? Or are you tired of your plant roots rotting in soggy soil? Or maybe there's this one plant that you just can't seem to figure out or get the watering right. If you can relate to any of these questions, you may want to consider trying PON for some of your plants. It significantly reduces fungus gnats and other pests. It's also quite affordable and reusable. In this video, I'm going to share with you how I make my DIY PON with just 3 ingredients. And who knows, it just might change the way you grow your plants. Let's start with the burning question. What is PON? It's a question I asked myself about 1.5 years ago when I first started using PON. PON is basically an alternative substrate to grow your plants in other than soil. It looks like small stones or gravel, and it's basically a combination of 3 or so ingredients: pumice, lava rock, and zeolite. You can buy PON pre-made from a variety of brands. One of the most popular ones for a long time was HOUSEPLANTS. That one also has a slow release fertilizer in it. What are the benefits of using PON over soil? Here are some of my favorite reasons for growing some of my houseplants, not all of them, in PON rather than soil. The first and probably my favorite reason is that no soil equals no fungus gnats. Fungus gnats typically need an organic mix to breed in, and because PON is made up of basically rocks, there's nothing for them to breed in. PON also offers better drainage and aeration. Because of this, the root systems of plants, especially some of my fussier plants, they tend to be healthier and have reduced root rot. This is probably my favorite reason. I find it so much easier to work with. It's cleaner and less messy. Soil can be dusty and muddy at times. PON makes repotting so easy and quick. I start and before you know it, I'm done. Another reason I love PON is because it makes my plant pots much more sturdy. They tend to tip over a little bit less because of the weight of the PON. PON holds the plants down into the substrate so much better. Another reason I like PON is because it helps to boost the humidity. Again, it's not a significant boost, but when I have multiple plants growing in semi-hydro or PON in a cabinet, I have noticed that that cabinet is typically a lot more humid than the ones with fewer plants in semi-hydro. It's reusable. You save so much money because it doesn't break down as quickly as soil. Soil and other mediums are an organic mix and they tend to break down a lot faster, meaning you need to replace and replenish or top up your soil quite often. PON tends to break down a lot slower, like significantly slower. And so you're able to reuse it much more than you're able to reuse soil. That's savings for you. So PON is great for semi-hydro setups. So if you love self-watering pots, they work perfectly together. I actually asked my mom, who got into semi-hydro growing long before I did, and she said her favorite things about growing in PON is because she finds her plants grow faster in PON because they have easier access to water, and that it takes the guesswork out of growing a lot of her plants. So my DIY PON recipe is heavily inspired by a YouTuber called You Don't Even Grow Hair. She has a video on her channel talking about how she makes her PON, and she also breaks down the value of making it yourself. So I will link her video down below because she greatly inspired me to make my own PON. But I've made a few tweaks that I feel like works better for me. The 3 main ingredients that I use in my PON are lava rock, zeolite, and pumice. Lava rock is great because it's porous, long-lasting, and holds water while staying airy. Pumice is great because it's lightweight but strong and keeps the mix from compacting. It also provides excellent drainage. The 3rd ingredient is zeolite, the smart ingredient. This one traps excess nutrients and slowly releases them. It also protects the roots from fertilizer burn, and it helps to control odors. With these ingredients, your substrate is going to break down so much slower and your PON could last you for years. I tend to grow a lot of my trickier houseplants in PON. If you would like me to create a video of all the houseplants I grow in PON and why, let me know in the comment section down below and I'll be more than happy to do that for you. The zeolite that I'm using is from EcoTraction Pro. EcoTraction Pro is basically a heavy-duty, non-corrosive, eco-friendly ice traction aid. So basically we use it in the winter to give us traction, and it's made from volcanic materials. I know there are 2 products, the EcoTraction and the EcoTraction Pro. Be sure to buy the Pro version because that would be the perfect size that we're looking for our PON. My lava rock, and it's from a product called Lava Grip. This is made of 100% lava rock. Our last ingredient is pumice. I usually get my pumice from local plant stores. This one, 3 liters, and this one is the medium-sized pumice. So if we look over here, we can definitely see the difference between the 2 sizes. Ideally, if you could only get one, get the coarse size. This is going to add aeration to keep it from getting too compact and basically crushing the roots. So I've decided to get a medium sized and a coarse so that they could work together and make my substrate stretch and give me more PON in one batch. You can choose to add or substitute any of the ingredients that I'm showing you today. I know some people like to add orchid bark, leca. You can adjust this mix to be whatever you'd like. Just know that every element you add or substitute will change the way your mix functions. So be sure to look into how your new ingredient will alter your mix. The reason that I do not add anything else, especially something like orchid bark, is because I would like my substrate to stay inorganic. I do not want to add anything into my mix that could break down. I want to be able to boil and reuse my substrate as much as possible. What I love about making my own PON is that you're in control. Feel free to adjust the ratios of your PON for the plants that you're going to grow. So the more pumice you put into your PON, the faster drying is going to be, because pumice is one of the bigger ingredients. If you want a little bit more water retention, then you'd want to add lava rock. That would be great for plants that need a little bit more water, like aeroids or monstera. I like to make my mix balanced. That way I can use it for multiple plants. You can also get way more product and way more batches of PON when you make it versus when you just buy a bag. I decided to make this video at this time of year because it's still a little warm for most of us, and I recommend doing this outside. These products have a lot of residue, and if you do it indoors, you could risk clogging your drains. Pro tip: do not skip this step. You could risk getting your roots gunky, and it's not a good look. Even when I'm a little bit lazy and I don't wash it the whole way through, I really regret it because my reservoirs are always gross. So trust me, don't skip this step. Wash thoroughly. When I'm making my DIY PON, I usually do equal parts of each ingredient. So I would use 1 part Eco Traction Pro, 1 part Lava Grip, and 1 part pumice. The way I would measure is basically by how much product my strainer can fill. So I would fill up my entire strainer with 1 product, rinse that out, put it into my bin, then do that with each ingredient. And then I will determine, after I mix my product together, if I would like it to be more chunky or less chunky. I'll make adjustments then. All right, let's make some PON. Let's start with the Eco Traction Pro. This is how it looks when it's dry. I just wanted to give you a chance to see it when it's dry because it actually looks very different when it's wet. I'm just gonna rinse it and try not to spill it while I'm at it. As you can see, the color changes significantly. It gets much darker, and look at how much gunk comes out of there. So I like to wash it for a good couple of minutes. And I also like to really get in there. Sometimes I dig my hose in a little bit to make sure that I'm getting the product that's at the bottom of the strainer as well. If you're gonna make PON, I recommend you do it now, because if you get winters where it goes below freezing and it gets frost outside and you need to close your pipes, it's going to be really hard. Well, you won't be able to actually use your hose outside. So I'm hoping that all of this lasts me until the spring. So this is what it looks like when it's completely rinsed. I'm just going to pour it into my PON bin. So this is what it looks like. I just want to show you every single step, and this is how it looks in my container. This container is 16 liters, or let's see, 541 ounces. And it took up just about 1/3 of the container. Next, we're going to go in with pumice. Usually the medium-sized pumice fills up my strainer, but this time I'm going to use 2 sizes. I think it's best to use all of the coarse and all of the medium. And as you can see, the coarse pumice is actually quite big. If I had to only use this, I just feel like it wouldn't be enough and it would just be way too big. So I like to have a little bit of the medium just to balance things out a bit. And this is just to compare the size of the medium and the coarse. The medium is on the right. So you definitely wouldn't want the fine because this is the size of the medium. The small is literally dust. And so you can see the comparison between the medium and the coarse. The coarse is way bigger. So yeah, I'm going to use both and all of both bags, which is 3 liters each. Next is the lava grip, and I must say this one is the most gunky of the 3 ingredients, so I like to leave it for last. And this is so far how it looks when I put the coarse and the medium pumice in there. And then afterwards, I'm going to mix everything in. Pro tip, mix it as you go. I think that's a better idea. And you can just see how much gunk comes out of these. So how exactly do you care for your plants in PON? For me, I would put my plants in either a self-watering pot or in no drainage. When they're in no drainage, obviously the only way to do it is to top water. I top water, fill up the reservoir to be just a little below the roots, and then the roots can go down and reach the water. If you fill it up too high, you're basically going to drown your plant. So make sure you're putting your plant in a clear vessel so that you can see where the roots end and you can know where your water level should stop. What I love about PON is that you have full control over nutrients. I have burned, if you could look behind me, you can see that some of my Anthurium in a chunky mix get burned very easily with fertilizer. So if you're one who tends to over fertilize, I think that PON is a great way for you to go. I personally do not add slow release fertilizers in my mix because I want to be able to control what fertilizer I use or if I use fertilizer at all. Something to keep in mind is if you're transferring a plant from soil or an organic mix into PON, the plant could slow down or it could even go through shock before it starts to progress. So if you see your plant declining a little bit before it progresses in PON, don't panic. That's natural. You've changed its entire growing system. So it's going to need time in order to adapt to the switch that you've made. What I would recommend is giving that plant as high amount of light as that plant can handle. So if it's a plant that can handle direct sunlight or lots of light, blast it with light. If it's a plant that needs lower light, give it just a little bit more light so that it doesn't burn the leaves. The point is when you make a big change like that, you need to baby or coddle your plant in order for it to get through the big adjustment. How do you reuse your PON? Well, I know a lot of people will fill up a huge pot of boiling water on the stove and boil their PON in order to sterilize it before reusing it. I personally don't do that. I just get the same strainer that you would have seen in the beginning and pour boiling hot water over it. Sometimes I would even block my sink, let the substrate sit in that hot water bath for a good couple of minutes. All right, now it's time for you to see how I use my PON and pot up some plants with them. We've made some PON. We've got our 3 components mixed in here, and I'm not gonna lie, this thing is pretty heavy. Like, it is solid. Technically, I had 3 liters of pumice and I used about a half liter of the medium-sized pumice. Using my sieve or my strainer to measure, each component has the same amount of product that my strainer can hold. So this is what it looks like. I'm just gonna mix it in. The one con about doing it this way is that you've got to really dig in to get all the product at the bottom. I know some people will mix it all together and then rinse. That's one idea, and that's probably a better way to do it. But for the sake of filming and for the sake of giving you a visual regarding the portion sizes, I choose to do it this way. All right, so it's gonna take me a little bit of a while to mix it all in together. I'm just gonna put some in here. Again, you don't need to do this. I've actually also just used like a shallower bin that will not make it so deep. I've done that too as well. Access the zeolite that's at the bottom. So that's pretty good. We can see how it's mixed up in here. We can definitely see a little bit more of the zeolite. So I'm just gonna pour this back in order to balance everything back out. So now this is much better. So this is a lot more even. So this is what it looks like here. A lot of other mixtures have different colors. I like the color of this one. I like it. It's mine. I like it a lot. As I go, I keep mixing. As I use, I keep mixing and churning to make sure it's nice and even. You guys always ask me to repot something, a Hoya from a propagation. So here you go. I'm repotting my Hoya Bella. You might remember the history of me and this Hoya Bella. We've been through a lot. And I've noticed that they can't stand heat and high temperatures. So I decided to chop it up, propagate it, and it's propagated nicely for me in water. I usually wait for secondary roots. We have just a little bit of secondary roots, but I think it's good enough. I think it's ready to be repotted because it's actually fighting for oxygen in here, because I notice I'm losing some yellowing bits here. It's yellowing in some places, so I think it's time. So I'm going to put it into a self-watering pot. Okay, so we've rinsed out our pot. It's nice and clean. I'm just going to lace it through. Place my wick in. And I always pull my wick up just a little bit because I don't want all the hydration to stay at the bottom. I want it to have a nice even hydration all throughout. So I try to pull my wick up, and then I'm going to put some of my product in, put a little bit at the bottom. And again, I'm going to adjust my wick accordingly. I also don't want my wick touching the roots too much, or else it can rot some of the roots when it touches. So I put just a thin layer to hide my wick a little bit. And then I'm just going to pop it in here. So easy. I don't do too much when it comes to my Hoya. This Hoya definitely is one I think grows best in semi-hydro. Again, I have a bunch of Hoya that I think work better in semi-hydro, and plants in general, and some I think work better in a chunky mix. Once I have a plant that's difficult or finicky, or I personally can't seem to get it right, maybe my care style or maybe my conditions make it a little bit harder for the plant to thrive in a chunky mix, I typically will put that plant into semi-hydro, and most times it works out. Most times it does really well. In semi-hydro, you could definitely water from the top. And while that is true, I don't think that's true for every plant. So I have some plants that I will top water. Just refill the reservoir whenever you need to. And that's it. That's my sweet little guy here. That's it over here. And that's it for today's video on how I make my DIY pond. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give the video a thumbs up. It helps the channel greatly. And let me know if you've made your own pond and what ingredients you use, how it's working for you. Also, I have a couple more plants to repot, so be sure to subscribe because you'll get to see some of the other plants that I need to repot before I leave on my trip. And I actually need to put some into an organic mix. So I'll be making an organic mix next. So subscribe if you'd want to see that. And thanks again for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.